Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. This morning's program is all about opportunities to learn, discover, and potentially make more money. Now that we have your attention, we're going to be joined later by Susan Benton, who came to Lexington to present a national award to the Lexington Public Libraries for aggressively creating dialogue in the community. That's coming up later. But first, it's a challenging time for Kentucky colleges and universities as they figure out the roadmap forward. Dr. Gary Cox has been on all sides of higher education. He was a university professor. He headed up public higher education in the Commonwealth for nearly 20 years. He worked in the governor's office in the 80s and with the legislature also. And for the last 20 years, Dr. Cox has headed up the Association of Independent Kentucky Colleges and Universities. We want to ask him about the difference that a college degree can make. Is college for everybody? How our campuses, public and private, are changing to deal with tighter budgets and uncertain times. And Dr. Cox, we welcome you. Very much appreciate you coming in today.
Delighted to be here, Bill.
Tell us a little bit about, first of all, what the Independent Colleges and Universities Association does.
We're composed of all of the nonprofit, SACS-accredited colleges and universities in Kentucky. There are 18, several in this area, 2 in Louisville, and then we go all the way to Owensboro, where we have a couple of colleges, and then Campbellsville, and so in northern Kentucky, several in eastern Kentucky. So that's our group. We have produce about 20% of the teachers and 20% of the nurses, and on in that area. Growing very dramatically in graduate education, master's degrees, doctoral degrees. Distance ed has changed this world as far as who you reach and where you reach them. So we have some institutions that are very traditional. 2 work colleges. There's only 6 or 7 work colleges in America. 2 are in Kentucky, Berea and Alice Lloyd. Very, very interesting institutions. So
work colleges means?
No tuition.
Yeah.
You work. And that's a very pleasing kind of an approach for a lot of folks. Been very supportive of Berea for a long, long time. Alice Lloyd is Pippa Passes, Kentucky. You've got to be going to Pippa Passes. And they are a tremendous place. They send some of their graduates on to graduate school and pay their way someplace else.
I look forward to hearing some more of the success stories of some of the specific schools here in just a little bit. But let's talk about it broadly first. As higher education adjusts to a changing world, with all they're having to do with, in the public sector, the funding cuts are coming down. Obviously, the private universities are seeing their expenses go up. But does a college degree still remain a ticket to success in this country?
Absolutely, and I think the way to think about that is a post-secondary degree, something after high school. And certainly a bachelor's degree. We've been committed in Kentucky since 1997 to the production of bachelor's degrees, because there's no question students with a 4-year degree are more successful, particularly in certain areas. And then graduate education also then furthers people's abilities, and are looking in Kentucky to a great extent right now at workforce. That person who doesn't maybe fit a traditional college education, but at the same time, it's very difficult with just a high school diploma, and without a high school diploma, you're really limited. And you see us moving more and more in Kentucky and around the country to blending post-secondary with secondary schools, with dual credit, advanced placement, other ways to get students prepared. And so when you graduate from high school, you're already a post-secondary student.
Where is the disconnect, do you think, in our state with the fact that if you have people who are earning more, they're paying more in taxes, obviously. If we could get more people in that position, we would be better off. But yet, when the budgets are cut, education is where they head sometimes.
No question. And it's we have been able to protect the SEEK formula pretty well in Kentucky. We're losing a lot of those extras that are so important in public schools. But in higher education, it's been very difficult. When you've got a population that has so many immediate needs, it's very difficult to invest in the future because you can't deal with the issues that we haven't addressed in the past. So that's the problem that we face. And for us, we only receive about less than 3% of the state appropriation for higher education in Kentucky. And that's all in student financial aid. There's no direct appropriation to our members. So we try to make the point that when you don't have any money for higher education, we're one of the best deals in town because we don't require any money from the state. And out-of-state students don't receive $1 in Kentucky when they enter. They're 9-month tourists for our institution.
Mm-hmm. You've been on all sides of this. We mentioned you've been a professor. You've headed up public higher education. You head up now this association of these independent colleges and universities, all with very important roles to play in education. How concerned are you about the future and where we're headed?
Oh, very concerned. Right now, there are two pieces of legislation at the federal level, for example, with the tax changes in the tax bill proposed, and also then we just began last week with reauthorizing the Higher Education Act. And you see in those two pieces of legislation a kind of declining support for higher education. There's been a lot of, for example, issues raised about not supporting graduate students and other things like that, and the decline in funding of research. And so it's very difficult. And at the state level, with the pension situation the way it is, it's for public institutions, it's just another budget cut when you have to put more and more of your resources into pensions, which needs to be done, don't get me wrong. So it really is a challenge at this point in time, and we're trying to move the workforce more and more to get those folks prepared that aren't necessarily going to get a 4-year degree, and trying to find in the governor and the General Assembly, finding those resources. So it is a real challenge right now.
Is college for everybody?
Post-secondary education is for everybody. I make that distinction because some of that is, construction, welding, and it's also healthcare. It's a lot of those kinds of areas. And I think the key there is to ladder a lot of that. So if I start in a health career, whatever I do when I first leave high school, when I prepare for a position in a health field, then I can ladder that, and I can move that then to an associate degree, to a 4-year degree. You see that a lot in nursing, for example, where over time you wind up with a nurse that has a master's degree and she's in administration or he's in administration.
People who maybe didn't even think they were capable of that, right? I mean,
exactly.
They begin to have success, and it leads on to the next thing. Yeah. And you'll find many people that get their degrees and say, well, I never thought I would have this.
Right, and we hear a lot about student loans and loan defaults. Yeah. Those are fundamentally students that don't finish. Yeah. If you start to college and you get a loan, but you don't get a credential, then you have debt and you don't have any preparation for a job. And so the other issue is helping a lot of those adults get back to college after they're 30 years old and they've got 2 kids and they realize they've got to have better preparation. So, and we do a lot of that. Of course, we're in Louisville and Lexington, but we're also in a lot of rural areas in Kentucky.
Let's talk about costs. And you told me that there are some misperceptions about who those students are in the private colleges.
Well, we always battle that rich kids go to private colleges idea, and in fact, the cost to go to one of our institutions, on average, is about the same as it would cost you to go to a research institution, because we give almost 45–50% of our tuition back. So virtually nobody pays sticker price. It's hard to explain, but and if you graduate in 4 years as opposed to 6, you've saved 2 years of the cost, because 6 years is pretty much the norm in most public institutions, and you've been in the workforce for 2 years. So so we battle that a lot, but we really work at this, and student financial aid, Pell Grant program at the federal level, our grants at the state level. That's what makes post-secondary an option.
As those colleges try to hold the line on their tuitions, and it's difficult, obviously, with the costs that they have of maintaining those campuses, and they have their insurance costs, employee costs, and so forth. But as they try to do that, there are other options, at least in the private level, is to fundraise, right? And try to encourage people to believe in their mission.
But I mean, public and independent colleges both fundraise.
Right.
Increasingly.
Yeah.
And fundraising is critically important for private colleges, certainly. Most of our institutions are very lean on the management side, and have learned over time not to borrow money, because again, that's an investment you have to pay for over time. So most of our folks, if they want to build a new facility or renovate facilities, they raise that money in advance. So that they can then do that. But you know, today, I don't know about you, but when I was in college at Moorhead, I lived in a room to start with 4 people, and you know, the restroom was at the end of the hall, and there was a phone at the end of the hall, and we ate in the cafeteria, and I worked in the cafeteria actually, and you went through a line and you got, you know, whatever they had to serve. Today, that world is very different. I always talk about how much the living conditions of so many young people are better on campus than they were at home. You walk into a dining hall and you have 10 different stations of anything you want, and that's great. Great fitness facilities. So it's a different world there, and it's a real challenge. Distance ed has been a big help too, for a lot of students who can't afford to come.
I want to talk more about that and how that has helped so many of our colleges and universities grow. And you have some success stories you want to share with us. We'll be back with Dr. Gary Cox, who heads up Kentucky's Independent Association of Colleges and Universities. Hope you'll stay with us a little bit later. Susan Benton, who heads up libraries across the country, will talk about how she was impressed when she came to Lexington. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers from WKYT. We're continuing our visit this morning with Dr. Gary Cox, who heads up the Kentucky Independent Association of Colleges and Universities. We want to learn a little bit now about some of the success stories that are out there with these. You said 18 campuses across our Commonwealth. You were telling us, for instance, people would really be surprised the number of people who are attending places like the University of the Cumberlands in Williamsburg, Campbellsville University.
Right.
The numbers are impressive. Right.
University of the Cumberlands has about 10,000 students. About 1,500 of those are on campus. They are in Seattle. In other locations where they work with students as groups.
They have a presence there?
Yes. Yeah. They have a presence in northern Kentucky, like near the airport. Yeah. If you're on I-75, you'll see their sign on a building there. They have students that come in, international students that come in periodically there to meet, because oftentimes internationally, for dual credit courses to count, there has to be a certain amount of face-to-face instruction. So these students come in. Both University of the Cumberlands and Campbellsville have cybersecurity programs that are very, very popular. I just read an article about the difficulty of finding an adequate number of cybersecurity experts. And they're offering them all around. Campbellsville, I know, has just signed an agreement with some folks in California where they're offering cybersecurity there. They have 8,000 students. Campbellsville has a technology center where they're doing a lot of workforce development training and still doing their other. Midway, for example, is doing a lot of things online. All of their programs are focused on careers. You know, their master's in business, for example, has an emphasis in equine management, in bourbon management. So we're very focused. And we like to think about so much of what we do now is career focused, but it's on a arts and sciences base. You know, you think about the world of fake news now, and how do we prepare to know and deal with the information that's out there if you don't have some grounding and the ability to think? And of course, that's what so many people want in their businesses. Even our traditional institutions, Transylvania Center. Transylvania is doing a lot of work around the digital world that we live in and preparing their students and looking at the careers. And of course, those institutions prepare a lot of students for graduate school, medical school, dental school, law school. A center is one of the leaders in the country now in international education, sending their students abroad. That's where we live in.
University of Pikeville, UPike. I mean, out there is this large medical community that's training doctors and optometrists to go around the world, right?
No question about it. And and they're really focused on the mountains.
Yeah, trying to keep people home if they can.
And so their osteopathic school has been very, very successful in training osteopaths who can specialize and do specialize, but oftentimes the way they're trained, they're general practice physicians, and they stay in rural Kentucky. You know, somebody from Paintsville is more likely to come back to Paintsville and practice than somebody from a major city. Or if you go away to a medical school and get a part of that, especially when you do a residency somewhere, you tend to stay there. So that's very helpful. The optometry school now is enrolled 2 classes, 60 students in each class, getting ready to enroll their 3rd, will be very successful in the same manner. And in Kentucky, we changed the law around optometry. So optometrists trained at the University of Pikeville will be able to do more things procedurally as an optometrist than many people around the country. So very successful.
Georgetown College had some challenges in recent years that were a little bit high profile. You have said that things have really steadied
right.
there.
Every year for the last 4 years, their enrollment has grown. They have one of the very best educational programs in Kentucky, oftentimes ranked #1 or #2. They serve that community well and are growing. One of the things that's happened over time is you look at accrediting, our institutions are accredited just like the public institutions. Because of the financial challenges, the accreditors have put more and more emphasis on financial stability. Traditionally, Georgetown had some debt that they've dealt with, but that forced them to deal with that. So I feel very good about Georgetown's future, and they're in a great area here.
And often you'll hear of a national championship up at Thomas More,
right.
Lindsey Wilson, or so, the colleges do things out in the country.
One of the things about small, while we talk about 10,000 students,
yeah.
Our campuses are relatively small.
Yeah.
And one of the things we know is student involvement is one of the major predictors of success for students. And you can be on the yearbook staff, you can be on an athletic team. And everybody, I've been in meetings with administrators where they say, or faculty say, well, Bill Bryant hadn't been to class in a week. Has he been coming to your class? Well, I'll go find out what's going on there. I mean, yeah. So it's that kind of attention.
Accountability.
Yeah, yeah. In small world that you live in.
Quickly, partnerships are important, I know, not only in helping the colleges and universities guide what they need to be teaching, but also maybe for some resources back onto their campuses, right?
No question, no question. The other thing about these private colleges, small colleges, is the importance about where they are.
Yeah.
Lindsey Wilson plays a major role in its community. College faculty are not going to send their kids to schools that aren't successful. So we know, for example, the economic impact of our members is about $700 million around Kentucky, and we have about over 10,000 employees. And when you think about Campbellsville and Columbia and Pippa Passes and Owensboro, those are really important centers, and they all are very closely aligned with their institution. We're very collegial. I mean, one of the things that's happened in Kentucky, and I hope I've played a little bit of role in this, is public and independent colleges work well together. We work really well with the community college system. A lot of times students that are a 2-year program, they come on to a 4-year program. We go to their campus and teach the 3rd and 4th year sometimes. So that's what we do.
I want to appreciate you very much for coming by.
Sure, delighted.
Hope you'll come back, and
sure.
we hope you'll stay with us. Susan Benton of the Urban Libraries Council flew in from Washington because of something that impressed her in Lexington. Next on Kentucky Newsmakers. We welcome you back to Kentucky Newsmakers from WKYT. Our public libraries are changing from just a place to read and encouraged to be quiet into more dynamic places to learn for all ages. Lexington's public library system recently received a prestigious award, and the national president of the Urban Libraries Council came to town to present it. Susan Benton has taken a little time to stop by WKYT and tell us about where libraries are and where they go from here. And it's good to see you. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.
What are some of the trends that we see in public libraries around the nation right now? What do they need to do to remain relevant?
Oh, they're more relevant than ever, actually. Our public libraries are really at the core of education for our communities. Actually, we've always been about that. The books really hold the concepts and the ideas, and now in our libraries, we've got lots and lots of technology that help people connect to the internet, get the access to information, to everything that they need to take care in life. I don't know about you, but almost before I leave the house in the morning, I've checked my smartphone several times for all sorts of different things. Interestingly enough, many people in our country don't have that kind of access. So the public library is the only place that you can use the internet. And frankly, if you're looking for a job, You need to go to the someplace online to find where jobs are, and then you need to put your job application in online. That's what happens at the public library today, in addition to leveling up your skills in computers.
And an opportunity to go learn things a little more in depth. We were also talking about, yes, the blessing of those devices, and you can find out instant information, but maybe we all need to explore things a little more deeply.
Yes, absolutely so. You know, the traditional reference librarian who was sitting behind a desk and was able to kind of point you to the right places to go in the library and help you research, that librarian today is really helping you discern what is accurate information and helping you to understand its context. So the library actually is not only providing information, but it's helping you evaluate the information and understand how it's relevant to what you're doing.
We have a tough achievement gaps here in Kentucky. It falls along racial lines, socioeconomic lines. As I understand it, you're encouraging libraries around the country to really get involved in addressing that.
Yeah, you know, I think in the, certainly in the time when I was a child, libraries were fairly passive. You mentioned we were quiet places. Yes, that's absolutely true. And people came in and they decided, you know, let me get this book or that book. So we were kind of passive in what we were doing. Libraries are very active today in terms of saying, listen, what can we do, no matter what age you are, no matter what stage you are in life, what can we do to help you to make that next step in your personal life or your professional life? And you know, one of the wonderful things about libraries, it really doesn't make any difference what your education level is. You could be a PhD, you could have never finished high school. Libraries will accept you. And whatever you are, we're anxious to be there for you and help you achieve whatever you want to achieve.
And we have these concerns in America about our literacy level. And at this point, we have we know that we have children who are not reading at the grade level that they ought to be.
Yeah, you know, this is a really shameful statistic that we own as a country right now. 76% of our children are not reading at grade level, at the 3rd and 4th grade. That is an outstanding statistic for the United States. There's not a community that can long-term be economically viable when the majority of your children who are going to grow into adults, obviously, cannot read at grade level. This is our knowledge economy. So more than ever, we need to have people who are educated and have the fluency and the ability to be nimble on their feet and in their learning to learn new skills. If you can't read, you're cut out. You can't be productive in the workforce.
You were in Lexington to present a special award.
Yes.
It was for the On the Table project, which was a chance to for folks to get out and address a wide range of community issues. What made that worthy of a national award?
Yeah, you know, we are so fortunate in this country to live in a democratic society. But the hallmark of a democracy is people being involved in their community. And On the Table provided an opportunity for over 11,000 Lexingtonians to come together and talk about what's our vision for the city? Where do we want it to go? What do we want it to be, not only for us today, but for our children and grandchildren tomorrow? To be able to give voice, to have people involved in creating what's going to be here for the future is powerful. And I just think it's one of the most outstanding projects that I've seen in many, many years. It's excellent.
Do libraries continue to be, and we hear this term in retail, brick and mortar,
Yeah.
you know, locations and places to go. Do we need to be moving more into a more virtual library scenario, or is it both?
Both. It is both, and it's both virtual, but even in terms of the physical space, it's inside the library, but it's outside of the library. If you were in Lexington this summer, when you were driving by the library, you would have seen a lot of fun things happening on the plaza outside of the library. It was an initiative called Phoenix First, and you saw children and their families and adults gathering to play together, to learn together, and that's going to be continuing on next summer with even more robust activities going on. Actually, yesterday evening when I was in the library, I saw this really cool cart, and it's a little kitchen cart that will be rolled out onto the plaza next year, and so people can be cooking together. but also learning how to use ingredients and bringing nutrition back into their lives, or maybe there have been more processed foods. So it's really, again, kind of meeting people wherever they are, and that could be on the internet, it could be on a website that the library has, or it could be outside of the library or inside the buildings.
Before you hop back on your plane and head back to Washington, where your association is headquartered, what do you want to leave with folks here to keep in mind about their libraries and encourage people to support them?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. You know, this is an important investment to make. It really is an investment in our future. I talked with a gentleman one time who was in charge of being a location scout for corporations that were looking to put new plants or new offices in different communities across the country. He told me that one of the things that they did was they would go to the central library in the cities where they were visiting, because it was a reflection of what that community was investing in. And I was very intrigued by that, because he said, you know what, we want to be a place where there's an educated workforce, and libraries help keep people educated. We want to be in a place where there's a high quality of life. And libraries provide that space where people come and get connected to one another, build relationships with one another, create community. So I'd say keep investing.
Susan Benton, thank you so much for coming by. We do appreciate it very much, from the Urban Libraries Council. Appreciate it very much.
My delight. Thank you.
And thank you for being with us on this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers. We certainly hope you make it a good week ahead.